My final summation, as I estimate it now, should take between 2 and 2.5 days.
Hello, dummies. My name is Heather, and I have been reading the text of Vince's closing. This is the final part. I hope you have found it educational, whether you are a lawyer, student, or just a hot mess. Now back to the text. 3, 2, 1. I don't care where he was. He could have been playing tennis, badminton, anywhere. He was a member of the conspiracy. He was guilty of that murder. That is the law of conspiracy, and there just are no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Even if Charles Manson was merely a member, just a member of this conspiracy to commit these murders, and never killed anyone, he would still be guilty of all 7 murders. But here he is not only a member, he is a leader, the leading force behind all of these conspiracies. Charles Manson is a clever fellow, all right. He is clever, all right. In Manson's world, he probably felt if never himself killed anyone but had someone else murder for him, he was thereby immunized or insulated, as it were, from all criminal responsibility. Well, it is not quite that easy. And when you folks come back into this courtroom with your verdict of first-degree murder against Charles Manson, you are going to tell him it's not quite that easy. In the offbeat world of Charles Manson, he probably never heard of this rule of law. Well, he is learning about it right now. The law of this state, ladies and gentlemen, has trapped and subdued these defendants just as they trapped and subdued these 7 helpless, defenseless victims whom they so mercilessly murdered. His Honor will instruct you that Linda Kasabian is an accomplice to these 7 murders. This simply means that in the court's judgment, Linda Kasabian's testimony concerning her involvement with these defendants on these nights of murder makes her an accomplice as a matter of law. His Honor will go on to instruct you that you cannot convict any defendant on the uncorroborated testimony of an accomplice. If Linda's testimony has been corroborated as to each defendant, then of course you can convict each defendant. If, on the other hand, her testimony has only been corroborated as to certain defendants and not as to others, you can only convict those defendants against whom Linda Kasabian's testimony has been corroborated. However, the prosecution's burden under the law, ladies and gentlemen, is that we only have to offer slight evidence to corroborate the testimony of an accomplice, and the slight evidence, which is to be independent of Linda's testimony, can be any type of evidence, direct or circumstantial. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, we offered an enormous amount of evidence, not just slight evidence, which is our only burden. We only have to offer slight evidence to corroborate the testimony of an accomplice. We offered a massive and enormous amount of evidence corroborating the testimony of Linda Kasabian. There's no question whatsoever that her testimony has been corroborated as to each defendant. Just for instance, Linda testified that 3 people were with her on the night of the Tate murders. What could possibly corroborate Linda Kasabian's testimony more than the fact that 2 out of the 3 people who she said she was with, Tex Watson and Patricia Krenwinkel, were proven to be there by positive scientific, conclusive evidence. In other words, their fingerprints were found at the scene. This evidence is totally independent of Linda's testimony. And the third person she says was with her on that night, Susan Atkins, confesses to 3 people of her involvement in the Tate murders. Of course, the confessions of Manson, Krenwinkel, and Van Houten also of course corroborated Linda's testimony. and all of the other many other items of evidence. All of the other many items of evidence I have just enumerated a short while back against each defendant on that Tate LaBianca murders, of course, constitute corroboration of Linda's testimony. The evidence connecting these defendants with these murders was monumental. The world's leading skeptic, I don't know where he comes from, whether it's supposed to be Missouri or someplace else. Wherever he comes from, the world's leading skeptic would have to concede that the prosecution clearly, unquestionably proved the guilt of these defendants beyond all reasonable doubt. I feel confident. I feel very confident that Linda Kasabian's testimony alone without any other evidence satisfied each and every one of you that these defendants committed these murders. She was on that witness stand for 18 days, ladies and gentlemen. Each one of you watched her very, very closely. If any witness was ever placed under a microscope, it was Linda Kasabian, and I am convinced that each and every one of you saw the same thing under that microscope. A young hippie girl whose aimless drug-oriented life tragically led her to Spawn Ranch, Charles Manson, and 2 nights of murder, 2 nights of horror. You saw a witness who took that witness stand with one and only one purpose in mind, to tell you everything she knew about these 2 nights of murder. Although she testified for 18 days, I am convinced that long before she was through testifying, long before that, it was obvious to each and every one of you that Linda was telling the truth. The defense did everything possible during 14 days of cross-examination to crack Linda's testimony. They never even caused a submicroscopic dent in her testimony. It was ridiculous. If they were wise, they would have let her alone. Not only was she an excellent witness, answering all questions in an honest, forthright, unevasive attitude, but the testimony of all of the other witnesses in this case was completely consistent with her testimony. Moreover, there was no way under the moon, no way under the stars, for Linda Kasabian to have known all of the details about these 2 nights of murder unless she was with these defendants. All that can be expected of you as reasonable men and women is that you conscientiously evaluate the evidence in this case and apply your logic and your common sense and your reasoning powers and the law given to you by Judge Older to that evidence, and thereby reach a just and a fair verdict. When you apply the law and your logic and your common sense and your reasoning powers to the evidence in this case, you won't have any difficulty whatsoever coming to the conclusion that the prosecution proved the guilt of these defendants beyond all reasonable doubt. Ladies and gentlemen, the prosecution did its job in gathering and presenting the evidence. The witnesses did their job by taking that witness stand and testifying under oath. Now you are the last link in the chain of justice. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Sharon Tate, Abigail Folder, Wojtek Frykowski, Jay Sebring, Stephen Parent, Lino LaBianca, Rosemary LaBianca, are not here with us now in this courtroom, but from their graves they cry out for justice. Justice can only be served by coming back to this courtroom with the verdict of guilty. Under the laws of this state and nation, these defendants were entitled to have their day in court. They got that. They were also entitled to have a fair trial by an impartial jury. They also got that. That is all that they are entitled to, since they committed these 7 savage, senseless murders. The people of the state of California are entitled to a guilty verdict. Thank you very much.